morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 27th episode of 2022. It's hard to believe we're already starting the second half of the year. But before we kick off, I'd like to thank the sponsors of Fiber for Breakfast, including our gold sponsors, Graybar and Vetro. Last week ended the second quarter and completed the first half of 2022. It's hard to believe that we're halfway through the year, and I sent a letter out to our members on Thursday reporting our second quarter results. Hopefully you have seen my update, but if not, I'm going to share a few of the key highlights. The Fiber Broadband Association added over 80 companies that have joined as members in the first half of 2022, and we continue to maintain over 52% of our membership from network operators, 34% are vendors, and the remaining are consulting engineer companies, financiers, deployment specialists, and others. Our recent Fiber Connect 22 conference broke all previous records, and we're close to selling out the exhibit floor for 2023 in Orlando. We also successfully completed our pilot for our fiber optic technician training program in May. We hosted a sold-out Train the Trainer workshop in Nashville, and we're on the path to launching this training to community colleges, veterans organizations, and training institutes across the nation. And our biggest highlight for the year so far is NTI prioritizing end-to-end fiber for our nation's critical broadband infrastructure and the $42.45 billion BEAD NOFO. Speaking of the BEAD NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we have spent the past several weeks studying the NOFO and updating the broadband infrastructure playbook with guidelines and state best practices for implementing the BEAD program. We're going to be releasing the new playbook on Tuesday, July 12th, and we'll be hosting a broadband infrastructure playbook post-BEAD NOFO update webinar at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's on Tuesday, July 12th. We'll walk you through the updates, and you'll be able to hear from some of the industry's top policy experts. So you're not going to want to miss that, so please register today. Also, I want to remind everybody our next regional Fiber Connect workshop is at Copper Mountain Resort in Colorado on August 23rd, and we'll be in Columbus, Ohio on November 3rd. So both workshops will sell out, so please register today. So for today's Fiber for Breakfast session, we're discussing the latest research topic and will be near and dear to all of us that work from home, in a session titled "The Work from Home and Collaboration Megatrends Are Fueling the Fiber Diet" with Ron Westfall at Futurum Research. But before I formally introduce today's guests, I'd like to introduce Nadir Noon from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Gary. Good morning to everyone who has joined us today. Very quickly, before I go over a couple logistical items, I just want to thank again our new Fiber for Breakfast gold sponsors, Graybar and Vetro. Now, if everyone would just keep in mind, all participants are in listen-only mode. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end. This presentation is being recorded and will be available to members only on FBA's website within 24 hours. You can find the recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of the presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We really appreciate your input. Now I will go ahead, pass it back to Gary to introduce our panelists and get us started.
Thanks, Nadir, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week at Fiber for Breakfast, we discussed changing the fate of rural Missouri with fiber broadband, an electric co-op with more broadband subscribers than electric members, with Darren Farnan, the General Manager of United Fiber. Darren did a wonderful job and received a lot of positive feedback on that topic. So thanks, Darren, and it was really fun to talk last week. For today's Fiber for Breakfast session, we're going to be discussing work from home and the collaboration megatrends are fueling the fiber diet with Ron Westfall of Futurum Research. Ron is an experienced research expert and analyst with over 20 years of experience in the digital and IT transformation market. As a senior analyst and research director with Futurum Research, He is an recognized authority at tracking the evolution of and identifying key disruptive trends within service enablement ecosystems, including software and services, infrastructure, 5G, IoT, AI, analytics, security, cloud computing, revenue management, and regulatory issues. Welcome, Ron, and please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work them in their Q&A. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron.
Thank you, Gary. And again, I'd like to commend the outstanding Fiber Connect show that was conducted last week. So kudos on that. And for today, Fiber for Breakfast, week 27. Yes, work from home and collaboration are important trends that are definitely impacting, our fiber ecosystem. And with that, on the next slide, let's dive right in. Thank you. And yeah, to kick it off, let's address the why of the survey. Why do we conduct it? Well, first of all, is it a survey that we are focusing in terms of confirming that work from home and collaboration trends are enduring. That is, we know from our own experiences or from the experiences of many of our colleagues that work from home is something that is taking off. However, we wanted to have hard data to back that up, and I'll address why that impacts the fiber industry. Also, what was important to the survey, it was also discerning, how organizations are approaching this today. That is, which ones are actually having an official, unified approach to their work from home and collaboration implementations, and which ones are still, more or less are improvising. It's an unofficial approach, but they have to do it. A couple of data points. We surveyed 525 key decision makers across organizations that fall into important industry verticals, and I'll also emphasize that. And also, in terms of that dichotomy, 177 of those 525 respondents do identify as actually having an official policy today. But as we can see, almost 2/3 are still improvising how they're going to best approach this new post-pandemic reality. And of note, in disclosure, Microsoft sponsored our survey. And with that, let's go to the next slide, please. And yet here we're doing a snapshot of some of the key demographics of the survey. I don't spend 20 minutes just going over demographics, but here this is something that early on has garnered the most attention from our perspective. That is, which verticals participated in the survey the most, which ones are having the most impact here. And a couple of observations. As you can see, it's a pretty diverse range. It's pretty much impacting the entire ecosystem in different ways. That is, how are we adapting to the work from home and remote work trends, and also leveraging collaboration platforms as a result. And also of note, over 90% of the respondents are primary or significantly influential decision makers. So this is really, impacting the key decision makers, and our survey was fortunately able to capture just that input. And also of note, over 2/3 of the respondents work for organizations with $1 billion or more in annual revenues. And naturally that stands to reason because the large organizations are almost inherently going to have to support a remote workforce or work from home approach in varying degrees. And with the next slide, we can drill down more on the vertical industries themselves. And as you can see here, basically the top industry verticals that responded included financial services such as banking and insurance companies, and secondly, manufacturing and construction, retail and consumer goods, automotive and transportation, and finally, media and communications. That represents the top 5, and that is amongst the organizations that have an official unified approach to this trend that we're addressing. And then the remainders are also pretty much strong parallel. That is, with the exception of automotive and transportation being substituted by healthcare, we're seeing that all of these segments are definitely having a stake in what's going on. And I think what's important to note that there's not a lot of a variance between those that have an official approach and those who are pretty much unofficial. And what I think is also important to note is the questions come up: how does manufacturing have, such a stake in work from home or distributed workforces? And we're seeing important trends such as AI and automation playing a more important role, a lot of it brought in by the pandemic itself and having to adapt to those circumstances. But also we're seeing an uptick in things like video surveillance and other similar video capabilities that are allowing more decision makers to actually maintain a work from home presence or a remote work presence, even for the manufacturing segment. And I think it stands to reason why the other ones pretty much have a stake in what's going on. And so this is, I think, important to note, what are the verticals that are inputting the data for our key takeaways, which I'll be addressing starting with the next slide. And yes, I think what we're seeing is that the data is validating, confirming what I think many of us are already experiencing. It's the fact that the vast majority of workforces are now pretty much in a work from home mode or at least hybrid. So for example, as you can see, it's in the middle there that at least 50% of the organizations out there are pretty much having to support a work from home approach. And that, I think, is something that is important for organizations out there to prioritize, is pretty much not only are we having to support this because of pandemic fueled realities, but now you really need to have a strategic approach. This is something that's going to have to become integral to decision making and to optimizing business outcomes and other important goals such as related to sustainability. And from our perspective, as we could see the percentages there, that this is pretty much solidifying the work from home business case in terms of fiber to the home becoming more essential to the success of workforces, and also fiber to workspaces. And I think why that's important is obviously not just bandwidth assurances and quality of service assurances, but also in terms of security. And I think the next slide will bring this out more. And here we go. This is, I think, definitely demonstrating the fact that amongst all the organizations, whether they have an official single holistic approach or are still pretty much having to support the work from home phenomena on an unofficial basis, it's, I think, key to know that this is verifying that there's still a lot of work to be done also. So what the data here, I believe, is suggesting is that there's a lot of flux, that there is actually still some indecision in terms of how far our organizations really adapting and adjusting to the work from home realities. And so what this also means is it reinforces a business opportunity for organizations out there that are, for example, managed service providers and have fiber portfolios. And what I think is also important to note is that the challenges are impacting both organizations that already have an official unified approach and those that are still pretty much having to operate on a more or less ad hoc basis. That is, for example, the IT unit of the organization is pretty much spearheading this, but it's still not an organization-wide policy. And with that, let's go to the next slide, please. And yes, I think this is important to note right here that the survey is indicating that there's tangible room for improvement in terms of how collaboration capabilities and tools are being supported throughout the organization. And so this is kind of begging the question, why is this the case? As you can see, those organizations that have already adopted a single holistic approach are showing more satisfaction with the outcomes of their collaboration platforms distributed across the workforce, including work from home workers. And what I believe is important to note here is that I think what needs to make a difference is the fact that the executive leadership really has to take a charge on this. That is, only those organizations where the executive team is actually playing a leadership role and saying, yes, we need to have an organization-wide work from home collaboration platform policy that accounts for these post-pandemic realities. And that, I think, is a big difference maker. But I think what is also fueling some of the indecision is the wild cards that I think we're familiar with. The fact that something like the Delta variant cropped up last year and caused, for example, cancellations and postponements of live events and so forth in the fall and winter of 21. And so this is something that is still, I think, impacting the decision making. Although, as we can see this year, things are getting back into more or less a cadence in terms of real person, in-person events, and that's certainly welcomed. But it's also not something that we can count on as being a permanent feature, and thus that I think reinforces the need for official policymaking that prioritizes work from home capabilities. And with that, let's go to the next slide, please. And again, I think what this is indicating is that there are organizations out there that are pinpointing why is it that they haven't actually had more success in terms of being fully satisfied with their work from home and collaboration implementations. And I think one key takeaway is that, as you can see, security concerns are at the top, executive support and IT support are pretty much, leading indicators as to why this is. And this, I believe, presents an opportunity for service providers, particularly ones with managed service offerings, to, for example, prioritize fiber security as a way for these organizations to have more confidence, to have more satisfaction in how their work from home and collaboration implementations are optimized. And again, I think it needs to be repeated. The fact is that you have to have the CXOs in on this decision making, that they need to be the ones who are going to say, yes, we have to have policies that are across the board and that definitely prioritize security, as well as ensuring that all the business units are pretty much on board with the approach. And with that, the next slides, please. And I think this is something that is a very valuable takeaway, the data that's indicated on this slide. As you can see in the left column, there are very high percentages here that show that the work culture shifts are huge and are basically taking on a positive perspective. And what I think is important on this is that the workforces are basically jazzed by the opportunity to work more from home. This is something that I think is improving productivity. I believe it's something that is raising morale across the board. And so in essence, this is aligning with the preferences of the workforces out there. And as a result, it simply reinforces the fiber work from home use case. And I think also what is in play here is, why are workforces so pleased about this megatrend here? And for one, I think we can all understand that people prefer to avoid daily commutes. It's a hassle. It can be a time suck, because of traffic jams and so forth. And so this is something that I think could be factored more into the promotion of any managed service or a fiber service, is the fact that by working from home, you're cutting down on daily commutes. And as a result, basically helping to sustainability goals of an organization. It makes the employees feel, I think, better about themselves, not just avoiding the commute, but also knowing that, okay, this is another way to help reduce carbon footprint, to help energy efficiency, advance green credentials, and so forth. So in effect, it's a win-win scenario that is being played out here, and definitely merits support from the fiber community. And the next slide, I think, will bring more of this out. And yes, here we are. why is it that the work from home and collaboration trends are so important? I think organizations need to get on the single holistic approach bandwagon. And I think we've seen, the major announcements coming from, for example, established organizations such as 3M, Fujitsu, Nationwide, as well as Siemens, basically saying that, yes, we are adopting a permanent work from home approach policy, or at least giving the employees that don't have to essentially be at a headquarters or a branch office the flexibility to work from home on a full-time or at least part-time basis. And that also applies to more or less, online internet centric organizations such as Shopify, Spotify, and Meta, and so forth. So this is, I think, definitely something that is being reinforced, is the fact that we have so many of these top organizations basically getting on this bandwagon, and they're actually, I think, the ones who are gaining the most fruit from doing so. Also, I think, again, this is something that service providers need to capitalize on. Here is basically an opportunity where it's, in effect, the mountain coming to Muhammad. That is, the pandemic has actually produced a new, enduring, permanent arrangement of distributed workforces, including an essential work from home component. And as a result, I think we're seeing more bundled services that are catering to this. That is, if you're an organization and not only do you need to support your branch office and remote offices in a traditional sense, now you have to actually support hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of remote employees under hopefully a common umbrella, a policy-driven approach that accounts for security. And so that can also, in essence, drive technologies such as SD-WAN, but also emerging SASE architectures. And clearly, there's a role for fiber in being able to make those types of services and capabilities more attractive to large organizations out there. And I think what's also important to note is that with the work from home era, is that now broadband becomes an essential for not only organizations, but also for people who are working from home. Now, the broadband bill is on par with the energy bill, the water bill. It is something that is just integral. People's livelihoods now depend on this. So, you need fiber to really optimize that. And I think we understand, the built-in advantages that fiber can deliver in this key regard. And so it's not just a tech issue or a work efficiency issue. This is something that's impacting society across the board. And well, a lot of our survey data points definitely focused on businesses. It's also impacting government and education, for example, and we definitely had input from them as well, but they pretty much paralleled exactly the key takeaways that we saw in the survey itself. And so yes, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our perspective on this and our key takeaways. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to you, Gary.
Hey, thanks, Ron. Really appreciate it. So, back in not too long ago, we used to think about kind of two networks, right? We had the residential broadband network, and then we had the enterprise network. And now that it looks like that most of those companies have at least up to 50% of their employees working from home, it sounds like that everything is now the enterprise network. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes, it's across the board. And yes, we focused on the large organizations because we knew they had to support this. And thus we could get that very key distinction of who is on board with a full time unified approach and those who are having to support it, but they're not quite there yet. And yes, I think there's definitely a strong convergence between the enterprise network and the residential network as a result. And I think this is being reinforced. And I think, yeah, on the 50% data point is that even those that are less than 50%, they're having to support some form of work from home or remote working. And so this is pretty much across the board. There's not a single organization out there that has not been impacted by this. And as a result, the twain have met. And so I believe that for the broadband community, the smarter you are about recognizing this distinct market opportunity, but also addressing this, i.e., how can we target something like Nationwide or Siemens and offer a bona fide across the board broadband service that is not just the enterprise needs, which are very distinct in terms of, say, the headquarters, but also ensuring that all of these remote employees are on the network in a secure fashion with all the bandwidth and quality of service assurances that fiber can only deliver.
So from our audience, we had questions on, the research tells us that homes have on average 18 connected devices and growing. And I know that you didn't address this in this particular study, but from your other research, do you have a perspective on that? What's the impact on broadband with multiple users on a network at the same time, with work from home, education, and everything else?
It's an excellent question. And yes, I believe definitely reinforces the need for the policy-driven approach. That is, I think the organizations that recognize this are going to be the ones that will have more near-term success and, as a result, long-term success. Because we know it's not just about connecting a PC from a home office like we are right now. It's also about mobile devices. It's also about devices that can be characterized as consumer Internet of Things and so forth. There, again, 18 is a significant number. And you definitely want to make sure that when an employee is working from whatever workspace they're using, that device is secured, that it's supposed to be on that network. And so it does increase what we understand as the attack surface. But the good news is that through secure policies, there are definitely ways to account for that. And it actually, one thing that I think is encouraging that we're seeing is that a lot of the open source community can now dedicate their resources to countering, the security threats that are out there, accounting for this, 18 devices, more or less, per household phenomena. It's a reality. It's just something that has to be accounted for and addressed. And so that's the challenge. But the good news is that we're seeing success in that regard as long as it's prioritized by the organizations that are having to support any work from home employees, et cetera.
What about, one, I'm always surprised that when I look at my network, how many devices are actually connected to it. It's always shocking. There's always a new switch or something that's the pool switch or something. What about best practices for collaboration and employee engagement in virtual environment? Have you, from any of your other research, do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I touched on some of that. I think one thing that it will make a difference is the service providers and the enterprises or businesses out there collaborating more on how to optimize their WAN implementations. We can see the writing on the wall. Yes, for example, if you have an MPLS-based service, it's reliable, but it's also somewhat inflexible and it could be more expensive than, say, an emerging SD-WAN implementation. And that, I think, is one example of how you can also implement a security policy that is based on a per application approach, on a per flow approach and so forth. It gets more granular, and as a result, you can have more confidence in the overall security. And following on that, I see adopting emerging SASE architectures. That is the ability to also integrate remote work from home employees as an overall policy-driven security approach, as being able to really make a difference in this key regard. And so, again, it's just, I think, a takeaway from our perspective that can make a difference in this very, key, vital area.
Well, Ron, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your research and insights and expertise with the audience today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Let's look forward to get back together next Wednesday. We're going to be discussing moose, lobsters, blueberries, and broadband with Peggy Schaefer, the Executive Director of Connect Maine Authority, as she discusses her most recent $28 million broadband grant from NTIA. So we will see everybody next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.